The year was 1985. Anime, manga, and technology were becoming more and more a part of Japanese culture. More than ever, people young and old were learning computers and were in awe with what possibilities could possibly lie within a simple computer and the stroke of a keyboard. Some people believed that we were truly reaching the future with home computers, while others saw it as the degrading of a culture. Aya Nishitani was born in 1955 in Japan. He grew up at a time in Japan when culture was really making a big shift because of a Western influence and the years of MacArthur before his birth. Technology slowly became more and more a part of Japanese lifestyles, and Aya eventually graduated from Hokkaido University, where he ended up getting a job as an electronic manufacturer. Here is where his mind started to wander at what possibilities lay within the machines that he was working on. At this time, it felt like anything could be achieved with a computer and a very skilled programmer. So many ideas came into his head. He was inspired to write a novel about what would happen if a skilled enough programmer were to be coerced into making a program that was not only dangerous, but could potentially cause catastrophic events on the world. Aya went on to write Digital Devil Story Megami Tensei, or Goddess Reincarnation. Digital Devil Story Megami Tensei quickly went on to become a cult classic novel, and would even get an anime adaptation. Not long after its release, Aya was approached for the rights for the property to make it into a video game. That company was Namco, which is known as Bandai Namco today. They approached Aya to convert his novel into a video game, but instead of Namco developing the game, they put the company Atlus, who was still relatively a new company at the time, in charge. Atlus was co-founded by the now infamous Koji Okada, who would go on to carry SMT into the modern age with a certain popular artist. Atlus made the game they wanted to make, and what the end result was not only a cult classic, but it was revered by critics and sparked a big interest in the property. Atlus pioneered the monster collecting genre with this game, and needless to say, it was a successful idea. The game was also notable for being the first real cyberpunk video game, and for abandoning the fantasy RPG genre for something more contemporary. The game also pioneered the monster negotiation mechanic, which is prevalent in quite a few popular games even today. To say that the Megami Tensei video game had a profound impact on the future of RPGs and games in general is a bit of an understatement. Atlus would go on to produce a sequel with Namco again, which saw the introduction to the now famous artist Kazuma Kaneko, who produced a majority of the demon art and game art for various Megami Tensei video games. He would even go on to make designs for the Devil May Cry series and the Zone of the Enders series. Atlus, with Koji Okada and Kazuma Kaneko, went on to acquire the rights to the Megami Tensei game franchise for their own company. Atlus was now developing and publishing its own games. Koji and Kazuma had an idea for another Megami Tensei game, but one that would differentiate itself from the last two. So they came up with the title Shin Megami Tensei, meaning True Goddess Reincarnation. Shin Megami Tensei took the concepts of Megami Tensei and made it to something arguably better and new. It brought over the turn-based gameplay with the monster collecting and monster negotiation, along with the idea that a computer program could summon demons. Koji went on to say that SMT was intended to raise the stakes of Megami Tensei. Not only was it going to be a demon invasion, but it was going to be a full-scale apocalypse, a la Megami Tensei 2. The original idea was to even have the game take place around the world, and even ending up in the Middle East for the final map. However, this idea was scrapped due to limitations. Despite this, Shin Megami Tensei went on to become a smash success in Japan, and quickly became one of the biggest JRPGs at the time. The reason we seldom hear about it in the West except for recently was because the game was never formally introduced into America till much later. And at that point, interest in the JRPG genre started to wane for more action-oriented games. Shin Megami Tensei was so big in Japan that it quickly spawned a direct sequel, which had quite a few improvements, including the UI and demon variety. Shin Megami Tensei 1 and 2 were both really successful, and it spawned many spin-offs such as Persona, Devil Summoner, and the Majin Tensei subseries. But for a time, mainline Shin Megami Tensei was seemingly swept under the rug for almost 7 years. But then, suddenly, the silence was broken. A new Shin Megami Tensei sequel was in the works, and it was larger than anything Atlus had ever made at the time. That game was the sequel/soft reboot Shin Megami Tensei 3 Nocturne. Nocturne was not only the most ambitious title in the series at the time, but it was also the game that had the most love and care poured into it. If you watch the making of documentary of Nocturne, you'll see really how much Kaneko, Cozy, along with newcomer director Katsura Hashino of Persona fame poured their heart and soul to this title. The title was very ambitious, maybe a little too much for its own good. Cozy had such high expectations for this title. He pictured this big, expansive world where you could look up and see the buildings above your head, and you could explore every part of this desolate wasteland that was Tokyo. But his dreams started to overpower what could actually be done at this time. That was the first nail in the coffin with Cozy, not just with SMT, but with Atlus. After all was said and done, Nocturne was released and met with critical and fan acclaim for its rock-themed score by Shoji Meguro, a macabre art style by Kazuma Kaneko, and near-flawless directing from Hashino. And on top of that, the wonderfully empty tone from the mind of Koji Okada. Despite fan and critical acclaim, the game never really hit the mainstream. This was the final straw for Cozy, who felt like all of his hard work, not only over the last few years developing Nocturne, but over the 20 years he's been with the Megami Tensei franchise has gone to waste. His passion, his dream franchise, was being snuffed out by bigger franchises like Final Fantasy. Cozy gave up and left Atlus to go create a new company who ended up to be less successful and went on to make mostly mobile games. Cozy's current whereabouts are unknown, but an unconfirmed rumor floating around the internet is that Cozy ended up going broke, and his name was found on a list of people who haven't paid their taxes, which, if true, is truly an unfortunate twist for such an ambitious man. Nocturne went on to be released 2 more times under the direction of the new director, Maniacs, and his team, who would go on to helm the majority of the future SMT games. Though Nocturne never really reached the mainstream, its engine and its assets went on to spawn a PS2 era of SMT games to come. From the ashes of Nocturne rose titles such as Raitokuzu Noha, Digital Devil Saga, and the now mainstream franchise Persona, which was revived for its 3rd story entry and 4th actual entry by Katsura Hashino. Persona was truly exposed to SMT in the West, and while many Persona fans never really looked past the Shin Megami Tensei in the title, it did spark a new interest in the franchise from the West. From that point on, it seemed like Persona was the future of SMT. Spin-off after spin-off of Persona 3 and 4 would really make you feel that way. After Nocturne's initial release in 2003, Shin Megami Tensei was put on hiatus once again due to it not being as successful as they expected in terms of sales. It seemed to the fans that Atlus put Persona before Shin Megami Tensei, since Persona showed that it was the real moneymaker, and for a time, you could believe that Shin Megami Tensei was really dead once and for all. But internally, Atlus the whole time was trying to make an SMT4, but they weren't exactly sure how to approach it. They had a fully fledged concept that went past the planning stage and actually went on to become a real game, Shin Megami Tensei Strange Journey. The title Shin Megami Tensei 4 was dropped due to Atlus and Maniac's team deciding the game didn't really fit well with the other SMT titled entries, because it didn't come to follow the formula that all the SMT games follow. The game still received very positive feedback from fans and the critics, which revitalized interest in mainline once again. Now fans were really hungry for something more of a sequel than a spin-off. Then 2 years later, Atlus and Maniac's team did the unexpected. Almost 10 years after Nocturne, Shin Megami Tensei 4 was announced. Like Nocturne, it was a soft reboot of the franchise, and this made many fans happy. The game was released on the 3DS in 2013, and it was a smash success for 3DS standards. It quickly became one of the best-selling RPGs for 3DS in Japan and America. It was positively received by fans and critics everywhere, and met many people's expectations. Really, the only criticisms that people had were the characters were a little shallow. But regardless of this problem, the general consensus is this game was very fun and a worthy sequel to the now legendary JRPG series. Quickly, Team Maniacs wanted to make a director's cut, much like Nocturne, but instead went a full-on pseudo-sequel with Shin Megami Tensei 4 Final/Apocalypse. And while it didn't sell as much as SMT4, it was still deemed a success. Shin Megami Tensei Mainline finally started to reach mainstream success, and is starting to pump out more and more mainline sequels, with the newly announced SMT HD project for the Nintendo Switch, and another SMT project for the 3DS for the 25th anniversary of Shin Megami Tensei, and the 30th anniversary of Megami Tensei. What originally looked like a grim future for the mainline franchise of Megami Tensei quickly became positive, and the series was able to not only find success in Japan, but also with Western audiences. Now, more than ever, the Persona fans were checking out Shin Megami Tensei, and the series is almost becoming what Cozy always wanted. Now, many people consider SMT to be one of the three pillars of JRPGs, the other two being Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy. Wherever Cozy may be, I'm sure he's happy that his franchise is finally getting the recognition it deserves, even if he's no longer with it. And I'm also sure Aya Nishitani never knew his creation would become such a big phenomenon. And with that, that is the current story of Atlus and its flagship franchise. This has been February's video for the year of Shin Megami Tensei. Next month's video will involve a deep look in certain aspects of the SMT games. Till next time, this is Rtyuiope from Rtyuiope's Game Room, signing out.